Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 312, and today's guest is Ben McKean, founder and CEO of Hungryroot. Okay, from a personal note, I don't mind shopping for groceries, but my problem is that I'm a creature of habit and I tend to purchase the same things over and over again. Plus, I am terrible about meal planning, so after doing a full shop, there is still nothing to eat. I guess I'm not the only one. As Ben and I discuss, on average, consumers spend 2 to 3 hours a week grocery shopping. 75% of what we buy at the grocery store are the same items as the week before, and 20 to 30% of what is purchased at the grocery store is thrown away and wasted. Sounds terrible. So what if you could have a service that cuts that shopping time down to 2 to 3 minutes a week, plans the meals for you, creates the list of ingredients that is only 10% of what you purchased the week before, and delivers it to your home? Sounds dreamy, right? Well, say hello to Hungryroot. Hungryroot is the only grocery and recipe delivery service designed to make healthy eating easy, personal, and sustainable. The company is profitable with revenues of $182 million for the first 6 months of this year, all while building a, relatively speaking, capital efficient business. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like Ben's background story and how entrepreneurship was part of his DNA from an early age, including starting a company at 18 years old that was ultimately acquired, the details about Savored, which helped restaurants book empty tables using dynamic pricing, which was acquired by Groupon, the full story about Hungryroot, which evolved from selling its own line of food products, and how they pivoted to a grocery service and using AI at its core since 2019, his latest entrepreneurial side project called Every, which is an app focused on enhancing human experiences and fostering deeper connections amongst individuals, advice on creating and scaling a consumer business, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. This week's episode is sponsored by MarketMuse, a content intelligence platform that sets the standard for content quality. Their AI-powered software enables companies to create predictably better content at scale that increases traffic and engagement, improves productivity, and drives revenue. Get more out of your content with packages starting at $0 a month that's free, plus you can get 20% off the MarketMuse standard plan by using our code Fizz20, that's Fizz20 at checkout. Go to marketmuse.com to get started. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Ben. Ben, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey Keith, thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to talk to you because we got a lot to cover here as far as your entrepreneurial journey, building great companies. But before we get into that, I did want to talk about, when I look at someone like yourself, who's, founder, CEO of a high growth company, and you've got your hands in lots of different things. And I would imagine you get probably asked to do a lot of speaking at conferences, and in the fall it's conference season, so it's good for visibility, good for the company. Yet it must be tough to kind of pick and choose because there's that time that's allocated to doing it. You got to go there if it's in Vegas or somewhere else. Like, there's the time away from the business. So how do you juggle that? How do you decide which conferences make sense based on the trade-off of not having your eyes on the business at that point in time?
It's an interesting question. I some of the times I do it, for fun, and it's great to get out there and meet people and sort of just tell the story. Other times there's a more specific purpose. So one of the conferences I did last month was Grocery Shop, where there's 5,000 attendees, and it's sort of the industry leading conference for our industry, and that felt important to, build some brand awareness around Hungryroot and what we're doing. The talk was on the future of AI in grocery, and so it also felt like a uniquely interesting topic to be able to represent the industry in.
Yeah. So, I would imagine that visibility and to talk about something that everyone's probably wondering, how is AI going to affect our industry, and be the thought leader up there just pays off in multiple ways.
Yeah, I've found that it very rarely pays off immediately. It's not
Yeah.
like you come back from a conference and all of a sudden there's all of these, connections that then lead to, business impact. But it does just, I think it's a data point for people. You're on people's radars, and things end up coming back over time and resulting in interesting partnerships over time.
Yeah, no, it's all about building your network and having that exposure out there. All right, well, let's talk about your background story. So, where'd you grow up? What were you like as a child?
I grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm the youngest of three boys. And it's funny because I do get asked the question sort of. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I get asked the question sort of why and what might have formed that. And one of the things I point to is I very clearly remember having this dream when I was about 8 or 9 years old about starting a candy store in the sort of the downtown of my where I grew up. And my grandfather was an entrepreneur, and he had a about 12 they were called ice cream parlors. This was in the 70s, and it's called Bailey's of Boston. And they had ice cream, they had chocolates. It was sort of a candy, ice cream candy store. My mom worked there as a kid, and she rolled the chocolates. And so I remember hearing all these stories about that. There's this really cool picture, sort of animation of or illustration of the store, and it had us like dogs eating ice cream, and that was in our home. So like it was a part of sort of growing up, was hearing about Bailey's. And that was probably ingrained in me. I'm sure that was part of why I had this dream. But like I always just thought that was really interesting. I never did kind of a lemonade stand or anything like that, but I always like I was kind of the typical third child where I was left on my own a decent amount. So I would sort of like make up games, and I definitely sort of had a creative energy as a kid. And then, but my first real entrepreneurial venture was when I was 18. And that was more just, I didn't want to get a typical job during the summer. So, I was graduating high school, and, I had to get a job. And what my parents were sort of recommending, which my older brothers had done, was to work at like a law firm or work at like a investment management firm as just sort of like an intern. And that sounded really horrible to me. And so, but I had to do something. So I put flyers in people's mailboxes, and at the top of the flyer, in big letters, it said cheap summer help. And then it listed like mulching, painting, moving, like pretty much, anything that I was willing to do. And then it listed my parents' phone number, like the home phone number. And I just got tons of phone calls. And so then I started realizing that actually I needed to hire people to help out. I also realized I needed to get a new phone number because my parents were not cool with getting phone calls all day
Yeah.
from random strangers in the neighborhood. And so I started hiring people, and that was the birth of my first company, and that really shaped just my love of entrepreneurship, because I did that for 4 years. It grew into a really real business. We had about 55 workers in my fourth
Wow,
year. Yeah, we did in the summer, we did over 400,000 of revenue and over 20,000 of profit.
that
And
is amazing.
it was really pretty cool. I'd set it up to be a managerial structure. So there were five managers who each oversaw 10 workers, and each oversaw essentially two towns. So we were in Middlesex County, Massachusetts, and our radius was about 12 towns. And every job, we would put a sign in the front yard that would say cheapsummerhelp.com. That's all it would say. This was 2004 to 2007. And people would drive by, and they'd go to cheapsummerhelp.com, and then they'd
Great,
call up.
great URL, great
It
domain.
was great URL. I actually haven't checked it in a while. I wonder what it is now, but and it just worked, and it was fun. Like it worked. It was profitable. There was none of and it was fun. So I really fell in love with entrepreneurship through that.
That's awesome. So you studied at Georgetown. You were a pitcher there, so you were obviously a D1 athlete. So after school you did the investment banking thing for a stretch.
Mhm.
What triggered you to say, okay, entrepreneurship, let me do this again?
Yeah, well, and actually, it's funny because you mentioned the pitching. I also do think, I think I was obsessed with pitching growing up, and I actually do think that that experience shaped me as an entrepreneur as well, because as a pitcher, you're on the mound, the entire sort of like you're a leader on the field. You're like I felt comfortable sort of in that position growing up, and I do think that actually probably did shape sort of my comfort level in leading teams. I wasn't a great college pitcher, but just like my memories of pitching are all from sort of younger periods. But to your question around sort of going into finance after, so when with Cheap Summer Help, um, I ended up selling it for $20,000. My and
Wait,
to
when did you sell it?
So that was 2007, but I very seriously considered franchising, because it really it was working. Like it was people, customers loved it, and it was really working. So I considered seriously franchising, and I looked at, I don't know if they're still around, but College Pro
Yeah,
Painters.
College Pro Painters, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of like um, a similar model, but franchising is really complicated and actually pretty high risk. So I decided not to do that, and then my brothers, who had both gotten into finance after college, they were like, learn like real business is sort of how it was phrased, and like big business. And so I went to Merrill and was in their investment banking group for a year. But the whole time I was there, I was thinking I really want to start something again, and I was keeping my eye out for opportunities. And I saw an opportunity. So this was 2009 in the restaurant industry, because Open Table had just gone public. Merrill was one of the book runners on their IPO, and I wasn't the analyst on the deal, but I was in the tech group, and so I was able to really understand their business well, and it felt like this really big opportunity to create dynamic pricing in restaurants. So take Expedia, Priceline, Orbitz, and how they adjust prices for hotels and airlines depending on where you go. That concept still doesn't actually really exist today, and it certainly didn't exist back then. And so that was the concept that I left Merrill to start Savored, which was in 2009.
Okay, so let's talk about, so originally it was called Village Vines, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was called Village Vines initially. So except for the first entrepreneurial experience, where the business just sort of manifested in many ways. What I've found with every other entrepreneurial experience I've had is the initial idea changes dramatically, just like dramatically. So the initial idea when I left Merrill was actually still tied to the business I had in college and bringing that concept online. So essentially, it was TaskRabbit. TaskRabbit, where you book local services, landscaping, painting, moving, you book it online, you have someone come up and show and do the work. That's essentially what Cheap Summer Help was. Cheap Summer Help just was offline. Instead of using an app, you would call, you called up my parents' home. And that was the initial concept. TaskRabbit launched about 3 weeks after I quit my job, and I realized like that's a really complicated task to build that business. And now there was someone who was actually building that specific business. In fact, I remember someone I'd written like a 30-page business plan, and I shared it with a couple of friends. And one of my friends who had seen the business plan was like, "Oh man, I'm sorry, TaskRabbit just launched. Like, have you seen this? They just launched." And so I pretty quickly realized I didn't want to do that. And
TaskRabbit started in Boston originally too.
yeah,
Yeah,
it had.
yeah.
And it's funny, this is bringing me all the way back there, because I don't know what's happened to TaskRabbit, but I know there's been other companies
They
in
were
that.
acquired by IKEA.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, I had heard that. Very interesting. Um, and now there's Angie, which, similar kind of space. So that, local services is interesting. So my mindset was in local services, and my mindset was also in restaurants, given the Open Table experience I'd had. So that's when I very quickly pivoted sort of into, we can't do all local services, but this idea of booking services online is really interesting to me. and booking tables at restaurants is really interesting, and that's what made the pivot into dynamic booking discounted reservations depending on when you go to the restaurant.
Well, so originally it was like you spend $10 and you would get 30% off your bill.
Yes, exactly.
So
By booking a reservation at an off-peak hour.
right, right. So this is a novel idea at the time. So how did you get restaurants to be like, okay, we have open tables. Yeah, this is a no-brainer. Then how did you build the consumer side? Like it's a, obviously a double-sided marketplace.
Yeah, so I had a great co-founder who focused primarily on the consumer side, and I focused primarily on the restaurant side to start. That evolved over time, but I hit the ground running in New York City, walking into restaurants. I mean, that was a very challenging time of my entrepreneurial journey. Like I would walk into restaurants, sit at the bar. This is like typically around lunchtime. So most of the time I wasn't ordering a beer or anything. I was just sitting at, I'd sit at the bar, kind of wait for the general manager. Half of the time, at least, the general manager is like, I don't want anything to do with you, get out. And then, you talk to a couple and like, I remember so many times leaving around 2 o'clock and being like, I need to go take a nap because
Exhausting.
I'm just struck out. Like, and I can't strike out anymore today. Like, I just need to kind of like reset. So it was a major grind. But then I feel like just like anything else in sales, we got a couple big names and it just made everything so much easier. Confidence went up. Like you referenced the other restaurants that are using it. And then we really started to build a brand, especially in New York City, where we had most of the good restaurants in New York City on the platform. And so it became very easy to sign up the rest at that point.
Very cool. So then, yeah, you evolved to that dynamic discount model and raise some capital, right?
Yep.
Uh, and then you started to expand into other markets. So that's really hard to do too. It's one thing to have your own backyard, which is obviously massive of New York City, yet to expand into other markets is really, really hard to do.
Yeah. So we ended up expanding into 10 markets, the 10 largest US cities. We made all the wrong decisions in many ways. So we were, I think I was 24 when I started the company, and nothing about people in their young, mid 20s, but like you do have a different mindset. So when we launched DC, we threw this big party, this big launch party, and we hired really aggressively. Like we hired a lot of salespeople across all these cities, locally in the cities, and we were growing really quickly, but we were growing very unprofitably. And but yeah, to your question about local expansion, I mean, we the biggest market we had was New York City, where we had I think about 600 restaurants at our peak, and OpenTable had I think about 1,500. So you could really use Savor to book most restaurants in New York City, and the inventory was more limited than OpenTable, but you get 30% off by booking our service, and so that fueled the consumer growth, because it was a pretty compelling user experience.
All right. So what led to the point of the acquisition by Groupon?
Well, so we grew really quickly in totally the wrong metric in retrospect. So our primary metric was gross transaction volume, which was how much dollars are our customers that are booking through Savored spending at the restaurants. And the reason we focused on that was because if you think about Seamless Web, which is now Grubhub, that's the metric that they focused on. Gross transaction volume. How much are your customers buying from your restaurants? And then it's, well, what's your take rate? What percentage of that can you take as revenue for your business? And Grubhub and Seamless at the time were about 12 to 13% take rate. And we were, I think, like 2.5 or 3%. But our whole point was we're just going to build gross transaction volume as big as possible, and then we'll bring take rate up over time. So within about 18 months, our customers were spending $40 million a year at our restaurants, but our take rate was like 2 to 3%. So our revenue was, I think, $3 or $4 million, and our cost base was a lot more than that. We never raised that much money. I think we raised 7 or 8 million total. So it's not like we blew through a ton of cash, but we were not operating this like it was 2023, where profitability matters and unit economics matter. And so what happened was, when Groupon went public, since we were able to raise money on the core local thesis that local is huge, and we were building a business in an attractive category within local. Groupon went public and they didn't do well. And so when they stopped doing well, that whole thesis went away. And we realized our ability to raise additional capital was going away. So all of a sudden we said, we really need to focus on profitability. And it was really painful. I mean, we went from about 55 employees down to, I think, roughly 17 at our acquisition. And we weren't able to get profitable even with that. Fortunately, Groupon came in and they really valued the high-end restaurant relationships we had built, and the brand we had built, and also the technology and the experience of a discount automatically applied to your bill through a reservation. That was very different than the core daily deal product. So Groupon came in and they acquired us, but that was a lesson of how much luck is involved, because if they hadn't acquired us, we probably would have had to shut down.
Yeah. And well, then you what was that like once you were like part of Groupon?
That was actually a fantastic experience. I was there about 2 years. It was part of what made it a fantastic experience was also just luck of timing. But this was 2012. September 2012 is when we sold. Right around this time, Google Gmail introduced the 3-tab experience in Gmail. So previously, this feels so long ago at this point, I guess it was 12 years ago, but it used to be if you got an email from Groupon, it would go in your inbox alongside the email from your wife or your friend. There was no distinction, of the emails. And then Gmail introduced your primary inbox, your promotions inbox, and your social. And Groupon went into promotions. And 95% of Groupon's revenue was directly from people getting the daily email, clicking on it, and then buying. So that really hurt Groupon. Mm-hmm. And it also led to a shift where there was this notion of we're so reliant on push marketing, where we're going to push an email to you and you're going to buy. And we have to shift to pull marketing. Hey, let's go out to dinner on Friday night. Oh, let's go to Savored to book a reservation. So Savored was actually one of the few properties and sort of user experiences that was truly pull marketing. We weren't reliant on sending emails to people to get people to book reservations. We were reliant on people knowing about our brand, and then when they thought to make a reservation, they would say, "Oh, well, we'll go to Savored to make the reservation." So one of the most important strategic pillars for Groupon, and I think this was 2013, was to implement Savored's technology across the daily deal product. And it was called G3. G1 was the initial daily deal, a single deal in your inbox. G2 was the marketplace of deals. And G3 was you would book a reservation at a restaurant or an appointment at a spa. There was a booking engine. And because you're booking a specific time, it's yield management at that point. So, you're getting a certain discount, but it's excess inventory for the supplier, the local business. And so leveraging Savers technology became a core part of actually Groupon's overall strategy. So that was really exciting, and I played an integral role in that. So it ended up being a fun time there.
Yeah, it's great to hear that, sometimes these acquisitions, they flourish and you're a key part of the strategy that was promised upon acquisition. And then sometimes it's like, yeah, it didn't quite work out as planned, and they ended up just sunsetting our product, and or the Silicon Valley HBO where you're just the acquired founders are on the roof waiting for their time to expire. Like,
Yeah, they did sunset our brand after about a year or two,
sure. Yeah.
but they folded it into Groupon Reserve. So they launched this new sort of platform called Groupon Reserve, which I led, which was the premium business of Groupon, and where you would book a reservation. And the plan was to then move it into spas, and you'd book an appointment at a spa. Um, so the sort of the technology and the user experience lived on, but the brand was folded in.
All right, let's talk about Hungryroot. So how'd you come up with the idea behind the company and get that started?
Well, so I'd say about the first year to 18 months at Groupon was really focused on leading Groupon Reserve and sort of this G3 initiative. So I was very focused there. But I knew I wanted to start another company, and I also was getting close to getting married, and I knew I wanted to start another company before having kids, because I know how challenging those first couple of years are. And so I started thinking about new ideas. But this time, I really wanted to come up with sort of a philosophy um, to help guide me towards a specific business idea to focus on. And the philosophy that I came up with was that you can think about business opportunities on a spectrum from in sort of inherently transactional in nature to inherently emotional in nature in terms of the relationship that the customer has with the brand. And so if you think about transactional in nature, so Open Table, I would consider a transactional relationship. If your relationship, your emotional relationship with when you book Open Table is actually with the restaurant. You go to the restaurant, and if it's an anniversary dinner or they do something special for you, or you just love the food and the experience, like you can develop an emotional relationship with that restaurant. You're not really thinking, oh, Open Table's like, you're not deeply attached to Open Table in an emotional way. It's a transactional relationship. Emotional relationships, food is one of the most emotional relationships that people have. Food impacts us chemically in terms of how we feel. It impacts us psychologically in terms of how we feel. Feel regret from what I ate last night, or pride that I'm sticking to sort of a healthy diet. So people's relationship with food is deeply emotional. There's other emotional categories as well. I think health, healthcare is obviously a very emotional relationship that people have. Even fashion, the clothes we wear sort of makes us feel a certain way. But food to me is a uniquely emotional relationship that people have. And yet, if you think about the brands in food, they actually don't develop emotional relationships with their customers. And the reason for that is that the vast majority of food brands are sold in grocery stores, where you're buying from the grocery store, you're not buying from the brand. And so, you don't like develop this direct relationship with the brand that's emotional. And that to me, and is still today, the core thesis of the opportunity at Hungry is when you help people feel their best through food, they are deeply attached to your brand. And that's what we do at Hungry. So when I first started it in 2015, I thought of it as a food product company. We were creating new innovative food products and selling them online. So I thought of it as like the Allbirds of food, or like the new age General Mills, or the new age Kraft Heinz. And so we created 6 products that were essentially a fresh, healthy version of a frozen dinner. Like it was a package that was about the same size as a frozen dinner. It had fresh cut vegetable noodles with sauces and proteins. You'd put in a saute pan, mix it around for 5 minutes, and you'd have a meal. And that was our initial product. So it was like a really unique, innovative product on the market. And we sold it online. So we had that direct relationship with our customer. What we found, and that was the business for the first 4 years. We kept launching these new products. We launched these cookie doughs that are made out of legumes. So there's a blended chickpeas with almond butter and chocolate chips, and that's like our almond chickpea cookie dough, and it's actually like the best cookie dough you'll ever have. It's fantastic, but it's a really unique, innovative product. You're not finding it anywhere else. We created these sauces that are these clean ingredient, interesting sauces, and that's what we were selling online. And we built it to 60 SKUs by 2019, and we got to 25 million of revenue. But we weren't growing at the rate we wanted, and we were unprofitable. And the conclusion we came to was you can develop the most interesting, best food products, but it's always going to be more convenient for people to buy them alongside the rest of their groceries. So we got a lot of like, I love your, veggie noodle meals, or I love your cookie dough. When can I start to buy them at Whole Foods? And it was like, well, the whole point is that we want to develop this direct relationship. So like buy them from hungryroot.com. And so what we realized in 2019 was we had to pivot the business, and we pivoted the business into being a grocery service, because we realized the most convenient way for people to buy our products was going to be to buy them alongside the rest of their groceries. And so we added, Bonza, Kite Hill. We started adding all these other brands to our platform. And that's when we pivoted into AI. Because when you are selling groceries online, you have to, there's a lot of ways of buying your groceries. So part of the way that we built it to be highly unique was that we built it so customers would trust us to actually choose their groceries and choose recipes for them for their week. And the way that we choose them for the customer is through this algorithm that we started developing in 2019.
Which just makes a world of sense. So my wife and I, we juggle the grocery shopping. One week I'll do it, the next week she'll do it, just kind of whoever's got the time. And it's so monotonous. Like come home with the same stuff and like, what do you want for dinner? And you're like, I don't know. What'd you buy? I'm like, well, I don't know, like same stuff. Like it's just like boring. Where what you're doing is just like, it's, you know, here's what it is. Here's the groceries that are gonna arrive. It's just, I'm like, oh my God, it's it just makes a world of sense.
Grocery shopping is a surprisingly um, challenging task that humans are really bad at. And there's a couple stats to show this. So one stat, you touched on this, 75% of what we buy at the grocery store is the exact same items from the week before.
1000%.
And that's because it's actually really intimidating to choose something new that you don't know what to do with, and you don't know if you're going to like the flavor. You don't know if the nutrition is aligned, and you don't know what recipe to make it in. At Hungry, 10% of what customers buy from us each week are the same items from the week before.
Wow.
And that's because they've trusted us to choose new foods for them. Um, 20 to 30% of what customers buy at the grocery store, they throw out at their home.
Yep.
It,
Yep.
Yes, food waste is an enormous problem. It's an enormous problem from a sustainability perspective. It's an enormous problem from a cost perspective. You go and you spend $100 at Whole Foods, you're only actually eating $70 of that. I mean, it's crazy. So having an AI that solves for that is really valuable. And then the last stat is, on average, Americans spend 2 to 3 hours a week grocery shopping. And at Hungry, they spend 2 to 3 minutes a week grocery shopping. And the reason for that is the AI has filled their cart with groceries and recipes. They've trusted us to do the work. They go in, they edit stuff, they remove things that they don't actually want. They add things that they do want, but it takes them 2 to 3 minutes versus 2 to 3 hours.
Sounds amazing. Like I don't mind grocery shopping, but it depends what store I'm at. And uh when there's too many people there at the wrong time that you go and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be insane, right? Um, but what I like about what you guys do is it's that, because I guess we could do a better job of planning. Hey, here's what we're gonna eat for the week, and then go buy the ingredients to use it. But I don't think that way. It's not like I'm not that creative when it comes to recipes and food. So what you do is you tell me what to do, but I don't want a meal kit company either, like a Blue Apron or something, where they're just sending me stuff. It's like what your model is just so more like impactful.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's really resonating. We have the best customer retention in the industry. We have the best unit economics in the industry. Both of these are so critical because in our category of selling food, delivering food to people's homes, there have been so many companies that have been built over the years that have actually built relatively large revenue businesses, and then they shut down. And they shut down because their customer retention is not good enough to sustain the business, and the economics on each delivery are not good enough. So we're really proud of how we've built it. We feel like we've been pretty thoughtful and methodical, and the impact we're having on people's lives is really special. We've developed that emotional relationship I was speaking about, and that's at the center of what we do.
So how did you build this operation? Because you got to select what SKUs to have. You got to have the inventory. You got to predict what a consumer is going to buy. Like it's a very complex operation. Fulfillment, dry ice, like it's there's a lot to it.
Relative to other companies in the category, our operation is actually very simple. And the reason for that is so we purchase finished grocery items from brands in the same way that a typical grocery store would, a Kroger or a Publix. And so these brands, and obviously, and 40% of our revenue is our own brand. And so in that case, we're purchasing directly from the food producer, the co-packer. So they deliver to our warehouses. We have 3 fulfillment warehouses. They deliver these finished grocery items to the warehouses. We do no food production ourselves. So food production is an incredibly complex portion of the supply chain. We don't touch that at all. That has been a major challenge for meal kits. Is they source in raw ingredients, they're chopping them up, they're portioning them. Food production is very complicated, very high risk. So we don't do any of that. Um, the grocery items are delivered to our warehouses. Our warehouses are pick and pack operations. So what that means is you have a human who stands in front of a bay of about 50 different items. It's semi-automated, so they have a box that comes up to them in a conveyor belt. The system knows what order that is and what items in front of that person they need to pick. So it lights up the items that need to be picked. It's all weight managed. So when they take it off of the bay, the light goes away. When they put it into the box, the weight that's added to the box, it sort of checks off that the box can go to the next person. So it's actually it's a semi-automated, pretty streamlined pick and pack operation, which reduces a lot of the complexity there. And then it's delivered to customers' homes in an insulated box to keep it cold with gel packs. And we leverage FedEx, UPS, and about 10 other delivery partners. So our perspective is we have extremely talented leadership in our supply chain and fulfillment operation. Our perspective is that we're not fundamentally doing anything drastically new in our supply side of our business. What we're doing that's actually drastically new is all on the demand side. It's the customer experience, and it's the experience of someone signing up and trusting us to choose their foods for the week. And so there like a lot of the complexity is more in the user experience, the brand, and then the algorithm.
Makes sense. So what's the current state of the company? Like whatever you can share.
So in the first 6 months of this year, we did 182 million in revenue.
Wow.
and the business is profitable. Uh,
Amazing.
so we're growing really nicely. We've reached a pretty decent scale, and the business is profitable. And we feel like the path forward is really similar to what's gotten us to where we are today. It's about thoughtfully expanding the items that we offer and optimizing the personalization uh, part of our value proposition.
And like you've raised capital, but it's not like you've gone and raised, 250 million growth round of capital. It's been, all things considered, what you've built, like it's pretty capital
Very
efficient.
capital efficient. Raised
Yeah.
75 million total capital, which is far less than most companies in our category. And a significant amount of that is still on our balance sheet. It's very capital efficient, and that really comes down to two things. It comes back to the relative simplicity of the operation. I don't want to make it sound like our operation is easy, but capital is required in food production. And capital is also required if you're leveraging a local delivery fulfillment method. So if you think about a lot of companies in our category, they are actually fulfilling from either a local grocery store, walking through Kroger and they're picking out items and then they're driving it to the customer's home. And in some cases, they're actually even leveraging their own vehicles. Tremendous capital costs there and tremendous sort of operational costs. And so those two elements of by cutting those two elements out of our supply chain, it's helped us to reduce the need for CapEx.
All right. So now you're working on a new project called Every. So what's Every all about?
Yeah, so I'm squarely focused on Hungryroot, where I remain the CEO, and but I did over the past couple years, I started to become really interested in this new problem, and it really emerged during COVID, where um, there was the disconnection that people were feeling from being at home, but then there's also the disconnection that people are feeling through the sort of echo chambers of social media, and we're speaking past each other, and there's political turmoil, there's social turmoil. There, more recently, there's international geopolitical turmoil, and there's crazy stats on this. So 70% of Americans feel that distrust is hurting our society. 70%, and which I feel like is actually pretty intuitive. I mean, it's talked a lot about, right? Is people we don't really trust each other anymore, and we're not listening to each other. But in some ways, the more shocking statistic is that 58% of Americans feel that no one in their life knows them well. So there's this disconnection, isolation that's occurring both at the societal level and then also at the individual level. And I experience this as well. I think where I probably feel this most acutely is actually in the work environment, where in a work environment, there's really tough problems that need to be solved. There's tough conversations that need to be had. And I view it more as a opportunity, that the more that you truly are connected to someone and you truly understand how they think and how they see the world, and you can see common ground with the person, that's the foundation of a strong working relationship. I think that's the foundation of a strong relationship in general. So that's the problem that I started becoming interested in solving. And when all of the generative AI tools came out at this point about a year ago, I just started playing with them because AI is really critical at Hungryroot, and generative AI is sort of this adjacent field of AI to our core AI. So I started playing with them to really understand how could we start to incorporate some of those tools, and there are interesting ways at Hungryroot that we can incorporate them. But I started to realize that actually they could be used to help solve this problem that I'd identified around people feeling sort of disconnected and talking past each other. And so I started training these large language models, and specifically ChatGPT, to create these conversational games that focus on a wide variety of topics, like purpose to relationships to society to, more like icebreakers and sort of fun topics. And so the AI is actually creating these thought-provoking questions, and it's providing prompts to then create images that are incorporated into the questions. So essentially, like we've trained the AI to create these thought-provoking games, and then we've built it into an app. And so as people play the games, it surfaces common ground with between them and their connections. And so the use case is, you might find that someone that you work with, you and they share a love of international travel. And that's because, you played the game about travel and exploration. Now you have something to connect with that person with. You might be totally different from that person. Maybe your like political views are totally different. Maybe you're in totally different stages of your life. Maybe you're in totally different departments in your organization. Now you have something to connect with that person on and to build a relationship with that person on. It might be, not a workplace experience. It might be, more family, something related to family, and you sort of now better understand someone in your family. But the games, the point of it is in a sort of fun, lighthearted way, a mechanism for surfacing common ground and better understanding each other.
Well, it just seems like it's you know, the using AI for good and building deeper relationships. Like, yeah, there's just a lot of negativity out there where I just shut myself from the news because I just can't handle it. It's too much. Like, there's
I
nothing
feel the same way.
positive. Like,
I feel the same way. There's nothing positive, and that's really what this is trying to accomplish. And so the name of the app is Every. It's on the App Store. It's the belief that's behind it. It's really founded on is that every person and every perspective matters. There's value to be seen, and so hopefully it does some good in the world. I have no idea where it's going to go. I just wanted to kind of put it out there, and I appreciate you asking about it. And I think it can have a positive impact. But it's interesting because out of my entrepreneurial journey, it's this is very different. It's a nonprofit, and and I don't necessarily have like specific goals for it. I think it's more. I hope it has positive impact. I hope it grows over time. Maybe it's gonna grow next year. Maybe it'll grow in 3 years, and but we'll see.
well, building a consumer-oriented business is really hard. So you've done it multiple times now. So what advice would you have for entrepreneurs that are trying to build something in, the consumer industry?
Well, I've definitely learned that building a consumer app is actually very hard. That's been one of the learnings from Every is it's surprisingly hard to get someone to download an app. In some ways, it's easier to build a consumer commerce company. Now, that being said, one of our seed investors, Lair Hippo Ventures, which is, I think the leading consumer early stage VC in New York City, and I'm very close with the team there. And they shared with me they're not investing in any consumer commerce companies right now because the
Wow,
dynamics of advertising online are just prohibitive, essentially.
terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah, so I think it's actually really tough to build a consumer company today. If you're selling commerce online, then the advertising environment makes it really challenging. And if you're going more for a consumer app, it's actually really difficult to get people to download it. So that's not very inspiring. I guess the advice. I mean, I think the advice is in some ways the same advice I'd give any entrepreneur, which is you have to be unbelievably lean. The worst thing I think I see entrepreneurs do, and I even see it still sort of this mentality pop up at even the stage that Hungryroot is at, is this notion that like people will solve problems. Um, I just don't think that that's correct. I think you as the entrepreneur, you have to solve the problem, and you obviously should work with people to solve it collaboratively. But you can't think that, oh, I'm just going to hire this person and they're going to solve this problem. I think you have to be extremely lean. You have to be hands on in helping to solve the most important problems you're facing or challenges you're facing, and it's a grind, and you got to stick with it. And, Hungryroot was a major grind for 4 years. Now we're doing quite well, and I think in launching Every and getting off the ground, it reminded me how much a grind it is the first year or two, and you just kind of have to stick with it, be resilient, and keep iterating.
All right. Do you have a good book or podcast recommendation for entrepreneurs?
That's a great question. I'll start with a book. There's one book that actually changed my life, and it's not necessarily specific to entrepreneurs, but is this book called Borrowing Brilliance by David Murray. And it's a relatively old book. I mean, I first read it 12 or 13 years ago, and there's one chapter in specific that I even can point to that was like what changed my mindset, which is around thinking about problems or opportunities in levels, and understanding understanding what level of the problem you're actually evaluating. So the example they give is, if someone gave you the problem of, you work at a car company and they said, hey, everyone is losing their car keys. We need to provide a solution to people so they stop losing their car keys. Well, if you think about the problem at that level, then you might build a bigger car key, or you might, build a big thing that flashes on your car keys. But if you think about the higher level problem of, why do people even need car keys? It's to start their car. Then it opens up the potential solutions of, let's get rid of car keys, and let's, why don't you tap in a code, or use something else to get in the car and to start the car. And that really stuck with me, is this notion of like, it's related to the 5 whys. It's when there's a challenge in front of you, really understand what are you actually trying to solve for. The one other angle that I think relates to this is the whole, spend 95% of your time coming up with a question, and 5% coming up with a solution. I think it's sort of a framework for contextualizing what's in front of you.
It's a great, great recommendation. I haven't heard of that book, and I love, because you do get some of the same ones, like Hard Thing About Hard Things and all the classics. But that's one I haven't heard of yet. So how about 3 apps you can't live without? Obviously, Hungryroot, Every, not being one of them.
Yeah. So 2 of the 3 right there. I mean, Spotify. I think Spotify is a fantastic user experience. It's really cool in terms of how they're using AI, like the DJ feature. I think that they have done a really, really fantastic job.
They're getting better too. And I agree. I mean, Spotify, I'm not asking them to charge me more, but the value
Yeah.
I get from that app is extraordinary, because I'm just like a kid in the candy store of exploring music, and their exploration's been getting way better. I used to get frustrated because I listened to a podcast recently where whoever it is that's doing the AI was like, they have a method of their madness of playing similar songs that you like that's on your playlist, because they want to retain you to keep listening. But I've just been noticing, like, they're serving me up a lot more discovery, and that's what I want Spotify to do. It's the
Yeah.
discovery of bands I've never heard of, listening to an album that was released in '99 type of thing. So
Yeah,
okay, Spotify.
I've noticed the same thing, and it's interesting kind of having some knowledge of how AI works to kind of see how the algorithm is working there. I feel like one of the opportunities is going to be for the algorithm to better understand the degree of discovery that each person is looking for, and when, because there are times where I'm really looking for discovery. There's times when I'm not. But I think that's such a great app.
Yeah. What do you like to do for fun outside of work?
Well, I have 2 young kids, a 4.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So that's pretty much, what I do outside of work is
Yeah,
spend time with them.
very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through your entrepreneurial journey, Ben. Like, obviously, you've done a lot, and I'm super excited about what you're up to with Hungryroot and Every. So thanks for all the great stories, and obviously all the great advice.
Thanks so much, Keith. It was a pleasure. Appreciate it.